Today's episode is brought to you by Audible.
Head on over to audible.com/rogue. That's ROGUE. Sign up for a free 30-day trial and get one free book that is yours to keep no matter what. Click on the link below.
Don't just do it.
You don't know how to go. What are you scared?
I think they're afraid.
Chicken?
Do it. Just click on the link.
Have you guys ever encountered like a beer that you didn't like?
Oh, like it's Sasquatch in the wild? It's like, I saw one hiding in a thicket. It was a really, really sour goose.
Once in a while, Grant will ask me to taste his homebrew.
Oh. Oh, wow.
Blast me like that.
Look of genuine hurt and betrayal on his face.
On this episode of Modern Rogue, treating sick burns.
Ordering beer like you know what you're doing.
Dude, remember when we had the beerists on the first time and we were
Kind
like...
of.
The first time we had the beerists on, the Modern Rogue, I thought it's too easy. Nobody's gonna wanna watch us just having a good time drinking beer. Hundreds of thousands of views later, welcome back, gentlemen. Good to see you guys.
Yeah.
You know, there's something about watching people that you're familiar with on YouTube get a little drunk.
Well, and that will most certainly happen today because we're gonna cover the fundamentals of how to buy beer like a gentleman, to walk into any establishment and act like you know what you're talking about.
I'm bad about that. I gotta tell you, I will walk up and go, well, that label's got a cool dancing skeleton dude on it. I'm gonna take that one.
Absolutely. It gets so overwhelming when you go to like a bar and you see this gigantic menu, all this stuff, or going to the store and just aisles of shelves. It's like that situation where you open the fridge and you just kind of stare and you're like, what do I want to eat?
Well, if you're John, you stare and you're like, I wish there was something in this fridge.
This is a...
On account of you having no job.
I don't have a job. Obviously, I'm making do with whatever's in there.
This is a true story. When I first started doing Scam School, I kind of was panic struck about what kind of beer to order because I knew it was going to be on screen all the time. And that's why in the early episodes, you'll only see me drinking Guinness because I knew that at least I wasn't a chump. Since then, I am proud to say thanks to you guys, my palate has been unlocked so much more, but I still get intimidated about the purchasing process.
Yeah, it could be a little bit difficult, especially if you go to a good beer shop that's got literally hundreds of options now. There's 5,300 craft breweries in the US operating right now, and a lot of them are packaged.
Is there such a thing as bad beer like that you'll find on the shelf at places?
Oh, all the time. Yeah.
Are there secret signs of like a beer that's been ruined? What can ruin a beer? All of a sudden I'm realizing, oh my God, I get to have answers to all of these.
Well, one of the things that can ruin a beer is if you walk into a shop, you gotta...
Paying for it.
Yeah, paying for it as well.
It's a real buzzkill.
Understanding how a beer is stored. Lots of things can make beer go bad very quickly. If you go into a store to buy, you know, a six-pack, and those six-packs are close to the window so that light's hitting it, you'll get skunky beer. That's how...
Okay, and that's what I've heard. I've heard that at bars, if there's like a power outage for a certain amount of time, they'll just open up all the taps and let everyone have beer on the house because they know it's about to get ruined. It gets skunked by going.
Where?
Have you never heard of this? Is this
That's a
thing?
bit of a misconception.
Oh, really?
Skunking doesn't happen with temperature change.
Oh, see?
Yeah.
That's the lie I
There
was
are
told.
other things that can happen with temperature change.
I thought skunking was when you walked through the food court at the mall and just farted by your device.
No, that's crop dusting.
Oh, it's crop dusting.
Yeah.
Never mind.
There are chemicals inside the hops that are photosensitive. And when light hits those, they react with sulfur and yeast and make this other compound, this thiol, which is in the same class of chemical compounds that makes a skunk squirt smell like skunk squirt.
okay,
Like literal.
Literal
yeah.
skunk squirt, yeah.
So when you're picking beer, let's say you're at a gas station or whatever, avoid the ones that are in view of sunlight.
Yeah, close to the window, you don't want those.
But the alcohol content stays the same, right?
Alcohol content will stay the same.
Now, heat can actually affect the beer as well because heat can react with the yeast while it's still being bottle conditioned. If you have a particular beer that has yeast in it.
And what is bottle conditioning? That's after they put it, I assume
Yeah.
it has to settle or something?
After they've brewed a beer, they put it in with yeast, and sometimes the yeast will keep eating at the other elements that are still in the beer.
The sugars.
If it's warmer, it can eat at the sugars in there a little bit faster and change how a beer tastes.
Now, do you have to keep all beers cold or at room temperature? Does it depend beer to beer?
As long as the temperature of the beer doesn't change too much, you should be okay. But cooler is better because that slows down some of the decaying processes that'll naturally happen in a beer.
So if you guys are going either to a store or to a bar, there are some universal things I think you guys can consider that will make the process of buying a lot easier. Like, let's say Jason, you're going to the store and you're looking for beer. What are some things you're looking for that beer to do right now for you?
Make the pain stop.
So you want alcohol. You want a beer that's strong. So you can narrow it down that way. It's really hot out. Is that a consideration? Do you want something that's actually refreshing, thirst quenching?
Sure, yeah, you want something that doesn't feel like you should be drinking it huddled around a fire in the middle of winter.
Exactly. So you can take these kind of considerations of, are you buying it for the weather that's outside? Are you going to a party with your friends and you want to impress them with something unique? Are you going to bring a beer that you think will just be generally enjoyed, so it's a little bit safer?
Pair well
I
with
didn't
your
even think
meal.
about that. Knowing your audience, like there are some beers that are going to have a bigger, more universal appeal than others.
Oh,
Knowing
sure.
your purpose in general, because
Yeah.
maybe you want to have a beer with the meal, and it's not necessarily just about sitting back and enjoying something. You might want to pick something that goes well with a particular dish you're going to serve.
Like if I was having a pizza, I might want something like an IPA because of the breads and the cheese, the fattiness. An IPA is going to have some bitterness. It'll scrub the palate a bit, and it kind of balances nicely. But if I'm going with like a steak, maybe a stout.
I don't think in my entire life I ever paused to think about a beer-food pairing like that before.
Well, in general, most people will buy their beer without thinking through the purpose of it.
So what are the general rules of thumb? I noticed that you're going with similar. Is it basically think about the character of what you're going to eat and then ask whether or not the beer goes in the same direction?
Well, when you're pairing beer with food, there are two ways you can go. You can go with contrast or complement. Complementing something is, yeah, getting a similar flavor, like something sweet and hearty with a steak, you know, because the steak already has some of those flavors.
Right.
That can go really well. Another thing you can do is think about the dish as part of a flavor wheel, and you have all those flavor receptors on your tongue that detect salty and sweet and bitter and all those things. Think about what might be missing from that spectrum
you
and
might-
fill it in with the beer.
So if you're having a dish that is inherently sweet, it might make sense to get one of those beers that has a sour tang to it
Yeah.
to basically, I don't know, make it an atomic warhead.
Yeah, something either dry or a little bit acidic will go really well with a sweet dish because it balances out and refreshes the palate for the next bite.
Imagine you walk into a store or a bar. What are the things that are popping up on your heads-up display that you should look for?
Let's start with a store. So when you go into a store, there are a lot of different considerations. You want to look at beer based on bottling date, and that can really affect certain types of beer. The fresher it is, if it's a hoppy beer, is actually better. There are other beers that are darker, heavier, that you can actually allow to age out longer.
Yeah, generally considering a good rule of thumb is to go with the freshest stuff available.
So this is not like a wine thing, or an aged whiskey thing.
Right, and you
This
can
is-
do that with some beers, but generally, fresher is almost always better.
Okay.
And lots of beers will have a little bit of help for that. You'll have a bottling date, a packaged on date. There's a enjoy by dates or enjoy before date. Some beers will have an enjoy after date as well.
And I think it's important to note that a lot of people see enjoy by and they think like, oh, after that it's gone bad. That's almost never the case.
Throw it in the trash.
Yeah, that's almost never the case. It's almost
Right.
always still safe to eat.
Yeah, it's going to be safe to consume.
Yeah.
15 years from your purchase time. That doesn't mean it's going to taste the same.
Sure.
Hops degrade very quickly.
Interesting.
Yeah,
And
so
even more so if it's in a bottle. So that's another thing that you can consider. If it's in a bottle, like we were talking about with Light Struck, bottles can degrade the hops a little quicker than if it's in a can. So you might consider that. Also, if it's in a can, generally it's going to be cheaper.
I would never have thought that beer from a bottle and can is any different. In
What
fact,
if it's in a glass can?
but
What
that's-
now?
game changer.
With all of the local brews showing up nowadays, almost all of them come in aluminum six-packs. And in my mind, I thought, oh, they must not be able to afford fancy bottling equipment. Never occurred to me that that would be a superior quality.
There's a complete stigma that surrounds the idea of a can as being a little bit lower class, a little bit more common than bottle, but it doesn't actually hold up to like what cans do for flavor and consistency versus bottles.
Yeah.
Cans are able to lock in the flavor a little bit more, keep it a little bit more secure.
Yeah, it's a much better storage.
Do you know what I can't
vehicle.
believe has not come back? When they came in tin cans and you had to use a church key to open it like a thing of motor oil. Like that just seems like that would be so hipster nowadays.
I believe there are a couple of breweries doing that.
Oh, awesome. I want to experience that.
They have the ones that like pop off the entire top, like it's like one of those old puddings.
Oh, yeah.
I had one explode in my hand and shredded.
I want one that you can
Dangerous.
only open with a katana.
Yes.
That's all cans, pretty much.
All cans. Okay.
And if you're going to a store and you don't know very much about what you want, you could, take a trip before your big party or whatever and pick out some beers at a store that might have singles.
Sometimes they'll let you mix and match a 6-pack, right?
Yeah, and I was gonna say that doing that is better. Like if it's not just a single shelf, because sometimes those single shelves will stick around for a long time and those beers might be out of code. But like I said, some beer stores will let you actually break up 6-packs on the shelves.
So you know you're getting the freshest.
You're getting a fresher product that way.
Yeah.
How do you judge something based on its price?
This is interesting because you'll see those large format bottles, 750 milliliter bottles, and those always look really great.
They really do.
They're just pretty. It feels like you're going in for
One
more of
duct
an
tape
experience.
on each hand.
Look at me.
Yeah, you have these 750 milliliter bottles and these 22 ounce bottles, the bombers, that people really like. And
They're a little bit more glamorous, but if you think about it, if you look at how many ounces are in those versus how much you get in a can, those are going to be more expensive for less beer. There's something about being able to take that beer and share it, but if you look at the cans, if it has cans or a 6-pack that is the equivalent beer, it's going to be cheaper in the...
This is one of those same moments you see in convenience stores where it's like a single liter of Diet Coke or whatever will be $1.70, or for $1.99 you could get a 2 liter, but the 2 liter is just awkward enough and you're like, well, not really, I don't need 2 liters, I just need 1 liter.
in beer, the discrepancy is much larger.
Yeah.
Really?
$8 22 ounce bottle of beer is the same as a $26 6-pack.
When you're faced with that decision, don't lie to yourself. Just say, look, I'm gonna get the whole 6-pack. Doesn't mean I have to drink the whole 6-pack.
Yeah.
But at least I'll be not getting screwed.
Yeah, because a lot of times the 6-pack is going to be $10 and it's more than 3 times as much beer.
So how do you pick a beer at a bar?
So at a bar, it's going to really vary on the different locations you go to, how they decide to categorize all their beer. Sometimes you'll find that they'll have light and hoppy and then dark and robust in categories. Sometimes they'll have like a spectrum where it'll be like, here are less hoppy to more hoppy, light to dark, and then they'll put like specialty categories for sour. So you can, once you've kind of identified the style that you want, you can just kind of gravitate toward those lists.
So I got a question on that regard. Like we learned the difference between an IPA and a stout and all that stuff, but I've never paused to consider if there's a big fundamental difference between getting it on tap versus from a bottle. Because nowadays I would imagine a bottle, do they taste the same? Is there something fundamentally different about a beer on tap?
There are beers that are different tap to bottle. Some of the bigger breweries try to make that difference as small as possible, but still, it's a different packaging format. You're packaging a whole lot more beer in a keg than you are in a single bottle or can. And a lot of times, like Grant said, you'll bottle condition a bottle, which is adding yeast and sugars so that the beer carbonates once it's bottled, and that's going to be different from what they do for kegs. So there are going to be some flavor variances for many different reasons between tap and packaged goods.
So here's the weird part. When it comes to sodas, I actually always, when I'm given a choice, will get the bottled soda because it's consistent, whereas fountain drinks, maybe the mixes, they got too much CO2 or they run out or whatever. Yet I don't feel that way when I'm going to the bar. Should I? Should I acknowledge that there's different variances on how they run their kegs?
Sometimes you'll go to a bar that doesn't clean their tap lines.
That's what I worry about.
Yeah,
I've seen gross, that green algae funk.
Hey, and even when you don't see it,
That's
sometimes
free.
you'll smell it, but people are getting better about that these days. It's not something you have to worry about too much. But if a bar's got a ton of beers on tap, maybe think about that if a beer doesn't taste the way you're used to tasting it.
It is always okay to send a beer back if you don't like it. I think there's like some people kind of hesitate on that.
I've never had that thought in my entire life.
Why would you do that?
No. But there have been beers
You
that I've taken the
monster.
first sip of, and I was been like, oh, this is not for me, and I can't handle this. Because you guys were mentioning before to not be shy about asking for samples. That's totally appropriate.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly. Like, let's say you want an IPA and you look at the menu and there's like 7 or 8 IPAs on this menu. You can go and pick a couple of them. General etiquette is that you should do 2, maybe 3. Base it on how busy it is at the bar.
Yeah, because if they're giving you free samples, that's time they're taking. You're holding up the line behind you.
Sure.
But
Be considerate.
Yeah, have that list ready to go and say, I'd like to try this one, this one, this one. And you can just do a quick sample and figure out what is the beer you're actually liking.
This is one of my favorite moments when I realized that there's a deeper world and a deeper set of acceptable norms that I was totally ignorant of.
So with restaurants, you'll often have specials, and those, as we've learned, are based based on often foods that are about to go bad that they need to get rid of.
Yeah, inventory that they need to move for whatever reason.
Is that the same with beer specials?
It can, yeah. A lot of times you'll see like a beer's really cheap because they're low on it and they're about to run it out. So they just want to finish it out so they can order the new one or put something new in. Or a beer's getting a little bit older and they want to run it out before it's not quality anymore.
But here's a really cool thing also. Some bars will actually let you buy half pints or sample glasses, like 4-ounce glasses, 6-ounce servings. And if you want to try a bunch of different stuff, that's a really good way to go.
Oh, so this is basically like off-menu pricing, where it's like it's not on the list anywhere, but you're like, hey, I want to take a tour of these IPAs, but I only want halvesies of each.
Yeah, some bars will actually let you do that. Some will actually have flights where you could buy 5 4-ounce pours and try all the beers like that.
And that's great because you can compare and contrast them as you're drinking them as well.
Okay, but we talked about this before. I always have a difficult time shifting my palate from one drink to another. That's not a question. That's a bad thing about me.
Okay, so some places can offer recommendations. How often do you guys rely on the staff to be knowledgeable and point you in the right direction?
A good bar should have good staff.
How do you know it's a good bar?
Ooh, this is great. What are the clues that let you know, like, sketch, not a good spot?
One time, we went into a bar together in Mexico.
Oh yeah.
And we looked at the floor, and it was all pocked and messed up. It was a concrete floor, and I said, hey, what happened here? And the guy said, oh, somebody threw a pipe bomb in here last night. So that is probably a sign of a bad bar, right?
In Mexico, that's a good bar.
In Mexico, that's a good bar.
They had great beer though, man.
It was very cheap.
One way to do it, like if you go into a bar and the clientele is nice and mellow and they have a good draft selection and good glassware. Not just shaker pints. Shaker pints aren't really great for beer.
Shaker pints is the traditional.
Yeah, the traditional pint glass that people know in America.
Right.
The straight walled shaker pint. That's made to mix drinks. That's not made to drink out of.
Huh.
But people buy those, like bars will buy those because they're easy to stack, they're thick, they're harder to break. They're a very convenient thing for a bar to do. But if your bar only has those types of glasses, chances are they're a little lazy. A good beer bar will have good glassware. Tulips, they'll have British pints.
Be on guard for what looks like beer as a commodity, like as if they're selling bags of ice and like, I don't know, it's beer, just have it.
Exactly.
And once you start having a conversation with your bartender, if you go in and you say, I'm looking for something that has a lot of floral notes, or I'm looking for something chocolatey, right, Jason?
Gross. I'm not a big fan.
You don't like chocolate though.
That's true.
Oh, as a matter of fact, when we did the Miracle Fruit, that was your complaint about Guinness.
It's chocolatey.
Yes, yes.
I hate chocolate.
You kind of give them a little bit of direction of what you kind of want in your beer. And if they start talking to you and they're like, oh, well, we have this one that's going to express these flavors or this one, then you can kind of get a sense if they know what they're talking about. You're not going to encounter too many people that are just straight bullshitting, I think.
Yeah, but you may encounter people who are just honestly like, I don't know, it's beer, it's good. A lot of people buy it.
You're gonna encounter some bartenders who are busy or just don't care. And that's fine.
Which, by the way, I suppose that's another takeaway. Consider trying to find because some of the best bar experiences I've ever had have been at that 2 or 3 in the afternoon in the off time, right? Personally, I hate lines. I hate being around other people. I hate you guys. But there's nothing better than just being at a bar that's very quiet and very slow and getting the chance to actually, talk this stuff with the experts.
If you can establish a relationship with a bartender at a place that you really like, that can be gold. You can suddenly have access to new beers that they have. Like they'll be like, hey, check out this one. Or they'll give you free beers occasionally.
Always take care of your bartenders and wait staff. Take good care of them. Yes, always tip, always tip. What's the best method of tipping?
This is something I want to know because I've heard that it's $1 per order, but that may or may not line up with the 20%. Right.
Well, if they're wearing a G-string, you want to pull it out.
I do 20%. That's just $2 on every $10.
Sure.
Really easy to figure out.
Okay.
And they really appreciate it. They're working their asses off.
It's one of those things where it's like, I will not remember in 3 weeks giving a generous tip. They will definitely remember the night that they had their biggest night of tips or whatever.
Oh yeah.
It matters so much.
And 20% is a baseline. Here's another way you can tell that a bar you're at is good. They don't have frosty glasses.
Really?
Oh, hold on, because this ties into what we learned about whiskey. Is it the frosty glasses masks the taste of the beer, right? The colder it is, the harder to taste the flavor.
That's exactly right. If you have a glass straight out of the freezer and an ice cold beer, very few of those aromas are going to get to your nose because a warmer beer is going to shed off a lot more of those.
I guarantee you there's somebody right now who's raging like, but I like cold beverages in
And
a
they
cold
like it.
glass or
Awesome.
whatever.
That's fine.
You could, but understand that you don't like beer as much as you like a cold drink.
And that works because if what you want is something cool, refreshing, and watered down, traditional tailgating kind of action. But I think that's a really good clue that you look for below the surface. Your beer dar is looking over and being like, okay, this looks like maybe it's not the premium beer drinking experience.
Yeah, and one thing that we're sort of about on our show is making sure that people understand that beer isn't just that. When somebody says, I don't like beer, a lot of times they're saying, I don't like Bud-Miller and Coors,
Yep.
Or those types of fizzy yellow waters, essentially. There's so many more styles out there and so much more great stuff to discover if you just sort of change the way you think about it.
So you've got an evening of drinking ahead of you. Is there any particular progression of beers that you should drink? Should you start with IPAs and then move into stouts or bounce around? Is there any sort of rule or guideline about that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You want to start light, go dark. Start lower alcohol, go heavier. It'll definitely work more in your favor. You won't be weighing yourself down at the start if you.
This is
start light.
interesting
because the stouts are heavier.
Yeah.
I thought the exact reverse because if I'm starting the evening, I want to start it off with a bang and then dial it back so I don't get too far ahead of schedule.
The problem with that is that a lot of those bigger beers have a whole lot of flavor, whole lot of bitterness. It means that if you have something a little bit more delicate as the next beer,
You're
you
not
won't be
gonna
able
get
to
it.
taste it as much.
That makes sense. All right, so no matter whether you get the beer at the bar or from a store, there are going to be labels with all this Byzantine code words all over it. Help me decode this.
Yeah, if a bar is selling cans and bottles, which some do, or if you're buying it from the store, there's always something you can look out for on the bottle. ABV, alcohol by volume, how much alcohol is in this beer is really important because if you've spent all day drinking and you're like, okay, I feel a little buzzed, I'm gonna go home real soon, I'm gonna have one more drink.
Oh, you start thinking in terms of like, how many beers have I had?
Right.
They range anywhere from what, like 2% ABV?
3.5. As a matter of fact, I was just in Utah where I believe all of the taps had to be 3.5% maximum.
Yeah, they have a limit there.
Yeah, and so
You can
that's
get
why
like a
I only
2%.
bought from bottles. I was like,
Right.
give me the bottle, and I want to see the label.
But you were telling me of one that's like 25% ABV or something
Yeah,
like that?
I mean, those are kind of rare, but you'll sometimes in a bar find stuff that's 16%, 18%. And generally, you know what those beers are because they're really big. But if that's the last beer you're gonna have before you drive home, you might want to rethink your pick.
So one more isn't necessarily just one more.
Right.
It is easier now than ever to find out exactly what's in what you're drinking, even if the label doesn't show it. There was a beer I was ordering the other day, just hopped on the Google, punched it in, and there's these amazing databases with every kind of local independent giving you the alcohol by volume, the number of calories, the notes that you should expect.
You said calories. Obviously, I don't care about such things. Beer isn't a health food. I mean, you could balance it out just like everything else you do in your life with exercise or whatever. Who needs that? But
John drops dead in the middle of the episode. We're like, oh dear.
But for every article that comes about beer being health food, it's not. So don't drink it if you're just wanting to stay healthy and you want something healthy to drink. That's why I don't really look at the calories part of it.
Which, by the way, nowadays you have beers that are marketed as being like, no, it's super healthy. It's the sports drink of beer.
Yeah.
Somebody finishes a marathon and they're just like, oh.
There are other better choices like water.
I would actually start running in marathons if there were people just like holding, run by
Beer.
and just grab
You splash it on your
Hefeweizen.
face and you're like, oh God, what have I done? Okay, so one last thing. When we did hacking the system, we found out that when they put garnishes, like lemon wedges and stuff in there, some people want to think twice before accepting those because unlike if you're there in person, you're gonna cut it right in front of you. It's gonna be fresh, you're gonna put it in. At the beginning of the shift, they chop up all the limes, all the lemons, all the stuff, and just leave them out there for everyone to cough over and all that stuff, and then they're gonna be covered in bacteria. Are you guys anti-garnish? Like I know you lost your mind and you'll never have garnish on anything.
I never touch any sort of fruit. I just kind of swat it off and then like douse it with rubbing alcohol. And
I'm from the border of Mexico. The stuff in our water was worse than anything growing in those garnish things. For me, it's a matter of taste. A lot of times people will put an orange slice on a wit beer or a lemon wedge on a Hefeweizen. I don't generally like that so much, so I ask while I'm ordering, I'll ask them to leave it out if I notice them doing it to other people's beers.
Got it.
You want to, for me, I want to taste the beer. I don't want to taste the lemon.
Generally, try the beer first, see what you like about it, and if you do think that it needs that little citrus note or whatever garnish, add it in.
That's really interesting. Whether it's cold, whether it's adding a garnish, all of those really just obscure the actual flavor of the beer. After doing the whiskey episodes, I'm a reformed man. It's always, room temperature neat.
You got to have a baseline.
Yeah. As always, you guys are the best. Where can we see so much more of the Beerists?
Thebeerists.com is the place to go. We have links to all of our social media there, every way that you can subscribe to our show. Yeah, it's a podcast. Every week we discuss and taste 5 different beers. There are 4 of us, and we try to steer you to the good stuff and away from the bad stuff, but we try a little bit of everything on the show. So if you guys haven't seen our second episode where we're on the Modern Rogue, Grant does this perfect pour of this beer.
It is the perfect pour.
Beautiful.
You mother.
And by perfect pour, we mean he totally botched it, overflowed the glass. And right now he's pouring beers for this episode. I did the first half, and I'm like, you know what? I'll let Grant do it. First order of business, drop a glass on the floor.
It was empty. We're okay.
The adorable part is that Grant was convinced, they'll just edit out me screwing up, not realizing he did a perfectly fine take afterward, but that was nowhere near as amusing.
No, it was amazing.
Yeah, I thought about that a bit.
You guys have a Patreon, of course, as well, right?
Yeah, patreon.com/thebeerists.
Yeah, but you'll notice it's right next to patreon.com/Modern Rogue, just saying.
Well, the difference is that that's the only way we get any money to do our show. So it's important.
What is it? Wait. Did you just high road me? Is that what happened?
So someone in the comments recently called you out for your lack of dedication to Audible.
Oh, no. My personal sparkle motion is Audible. Audible.com/rogue. You sign up, you get 30 days for free. You get to keep one book. Pick any book you want. Pick Angel Killer. It's the first in a series of the Jessica Blackwood novels, and it's so brilliant. Andrew Mayne, friend of mine for a long time, he's had his own TV show on A&E, tours all over the world, doing illusions and magic, wrote a credible magic-based FBI novel. It's about somebody who is a murderer but wants to be hailed as a religious leader. So he manufactures these unbelievable illusions, trying to stir up controversy on social media. He gets all these kind of literal cult followers.
Is this a how-to guide?
Okay, let me just put it this way. I am glad Andrew Mayne is writing novels about this guy and not being this guy. It's amazing.
I am reading an old fantasy book called The Black Company by Glen. It's like a bunch of hard-bitten mercenaries who are mostly trying to do the right thing. Puts a kind of almost a paramilitary gritty spin on all the fantasy tropes.
Oh, that's awesome. Total truth time. There are very few technological advancements that have made a bigger impact in my life than Audible. The ability to listen to 20 to 40 extra books every year. This is extra books on top of whatever you normally read, has been mind expanding. It's been incredible, and it's all because of Audible.
Yeah, try buying an audiobook just without Audible. It's kind of expensive.
Kind of $1 billion.
Yeah, take that money and just put it towards Audible.
Yeah, dude, just admit that you want to expand your mind, get the credits. Everything is so easy, so much fun. Audible.
Audible.com/rogue. Didn't you know before we shoot, there's always like a tailgate party? Only no parking lot or trucks or anything.
I've been unemployed for 2 years, so every day's a tailgate party.
This got a little heavy.
Wow.